It was a Tuesday night in November when I first saw him. I had just gotten off the late shift at work and was headed to my car in the mostly empty parking garage. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously as I briskly walked to where I had parked. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a tall, slim figure standing motionless by the concrete pillar. As I got closer, I saw he was staring at me intently. I averted my gaze and walked faster, eager to get to the safety of my car. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about the man. Who was he and why had he been staring at me like that? I tried to convince myself he was probably just spaced out or waiting for someone, but something about him had seemed off. A few nights later, I saw him again in the parking garage, in the same exact spot. His gaunt face was obscured by stringy hair, and he wore an oversized coat that hung off his frame. As I passed him, a chill went down my spine. His eyes followed me until I turned the corner. I started parking on a different level of the garage, hoping to avoid him. But over the next few weeks, I caught glimpses of him all around my neighborhood. On the sidewalk near my apartment, at the coffee shop down the block, in the alley by the grocery store. He was always lurking, watching me. One night, I got home after dark and fumbled to unlock my door. That's when I heard it, the slow, steady footsteps. I whipped my head around and saw the tall, thin man at the end of the hall, walking toward me. I rushed inside and locked the door, my heart pounding. Things started happening in my apartment when I wasn't home. The faucet would be left running. My papers were rifled through. Clothes were missing from my closet. Someone was coming in here. Terrified, I had my landlord change the locks, but it kept happening. That's when I realized with dread that it had to be him. The man was not just following me. He had made his way into my home. Soon after, I came back to find my bedroom completely ransacked. In my mirror, written in red lipstick, were the words, "I'm watching you." I felt sick. This man was escalating. I didn't go straight home from work anymore. I would drive around aimlessly just to make sure he wasn't following me. At night, I double-checked the locks and slept with a bat under my bed. But my apartment still didn't feel safe. Nowhere did. One night, I got so paranoid driving in circles to shake a potential tail that I got lost down some back roads. As I squinted, trying to see street signs in the darkness, my blood ran cold. There he was, the tall, thin man, standing under a flickering street lamp just ahead. Before I could react, he started stumbling toward my car. I threw the gear in reverse and floored it, watching him grow smaller in my rearview mirror. My heart hammered against my ribs. When I got home, I started packing immediately. I was getting out of this town. The next day, I loaded everything into my car and took off. I drove for hours until my exhaustion forced me to stop at a rundown motel off the highway. The place seemed deserted, but I didn't care. I was just grateful to finally rest. In the middle of the night, I awoke suddenly. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. Something felt off. I turned and let out a gasp. The tall, thin man was standing at the foot of my bed, leering down at me. I screamed and scrambled away, fumbling to turn on the light. But when my eyes adjusted, there was no one there. The room was empty. Had I imagined him, shaking, I huddled in the corner with blankets wrapped around me. Eventually, I fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning, I continued my escape. I was anxious to get far away from that town and the man who had terrorized me. As I drove, I blasted music to stay awake. Up ahead, I spotted a hitchhiker with his thumb out. My stomach dropped as I recognized the oversized coat and stringy hair. No, impossible. I sped past, white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Again and again over the next few hours, I saw him, standing along the side of the highway, trudging down rural roads, lurking near gas stations. There was no escape. He was following me. By nightfall, my gas light came on. I pulled off at the next exit in search of a station. The area was totally foreign to me. My heart sank as my car slowed to a stop on a dark, quiet street. I had run out of gas. I waited nervously with the doors locked, afraid to get out. Where was he? Then I spotted the familiar lanky silhouette under a street lamp at the end of the block. He started stumbling toward my car. I panicked, realizing I was trapped. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The man was getting closer. Hyperventilating, I searched for a weapon, anything to defend myself. As the man reached my car, I let out a primal scream and swung the tire iron at him as hard as I could. The metal connected with his head with a sickening crack. He collapsed to the ground. I sat there in shock, trembling uncontrollably. Was he dead? Had I killed him? Before I could react, I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder by the second. I looked down at the bloody tire iron still clutched in my hands. I had no choice. I shoved the car door open and started running into the dark woods. Thorns tore at my clothes and skin, but I didn't stop. I ran until every muscle in my body screamed for me to stop. Gasping for air, I collapsed behind a fallen tree. I'll never know if that man was following me or if it was all in my mind, but I'll always wonder. Where did he come from? Who was he? And what did he want from me? All I know is that he'll forever haunt my nightmares. Because now, I don't feel safe anywhere, even in broad daylight. I still find myself glancing over my shoulder, searching for his familiar shadow, wondering if he's out there, watching, waiting to finish what he started. I don't normally work the closing shift at the diner, but my coworker Stacy called in sick, so I agreed to cover for her. It was a Tuesday night, and the place had been dead all evening. I kept glancing at the clock, willing the minutes to tick by faster so I could close up and get home. Around 9 p.m., the bell above the door jingled, and a man walked in. He looked to be in his mid-30s, average height and build, wearing jeans and a plain black sweatshirt with the hood pulled up over his head. I grabbed a menu and headed over to seat him. "Just one tonight?" I asked with an obligatory server's smile. He nodded, not making eye contact. I led him to a booth in the back corner, far away from the back corner, far away from the big front windows. It was an instinctive move. Something about him gave me the creeps, and I didn't want him sitting somewhere too visible. As he slid into the vinyl seat, I noticed a large hunting knife strapped to his belt. Who brings a weapon like that into a diner? I took his order, black coffee and a slice of pie, and hurried to the kitchen to put it in. "Nancy, the night cook, shot me a questioning look. That guy give you weird vibes too?" she asked. I nodded. "I'll keep an eye on the security cameras," she assured me. Nancy had a maternal streak and didn't like seeing any of us waitresses put in uncomfortable positions. I appreciated the backup. When I brought the man his order, he was staring out the window into the darkened parking lot. He turned those unsettling eyes on me as I set the plate down. "Anything else I can get for you?" I asked politely. He shook his head, glancing down at the hunting knife on his belt. My heart skipped a beat. Was that meant to be a threat? I walked away on unsteady legs, keeping one eye on him as I pretended to wipe down tables while waiting for him to leave. After what felt like forever, the man paid his bill and departed without a word. I sagged against the nearest wall, relief flooding through me. Nancy poked her head out from the kitchen. "He's gone now, honey," she said gently. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I replied shakily. "Just got spooked, I guess." "I don't blame you. You looked like trouble." I spent the next half hour finishing up my closing duties, trying to shrug off the uneasy encounter. At 10 p.m., I locked the front door, set the alarm, and headed out to the employee parking lot. It was pitch black, the only light coming from a flickering lamppost near the dumpsters. I was almost to my car when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on gravel behind me. I froze, goosebumps rising on my skin. Glancing back slowly, I saw a dark figure approaching. Hooded man from the diner. Terror seized me. How did he know where I parked? Why was he following me? I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking. The man picked up his pace. 20 feet away now. I unlocked the car door and wrenched it open just as he lunged for me. I leapt inside, slamming the door shut and hitting the lock button. He grabbed the handle and yanked violently, his eyes wild. "Let me in," he yelled. face pressed against the window. "Let me in now." I shoved the key in the ignition, tires squealing as I peeled out of the lot. My heart hammered against my ribs, breaths coming in panicked gasps. He chased after me at a full sprint before finally giving up, shouting threats I couldn't make out over the roaring blood in my ears. I drove around aimlessly for 20 minutes, checking my rear view until I was certain I wasn't being followed. What did he want from me? Why did I feel like I'd narrowly escaped something horrific tonight? A few days later, I arrived for my evening shift with Nancy's words still ringing in my head. "Be extra careful tonight, honey. There was a strange man lurking around outside earlier, asking questions about you." My stomach dropped. It had to be him, the hooded creep from the other night. But why was he looking for me? The dinner rush kept me too busy to dwell on it. It wasn't until after we closed at 9 that I remembered Nancy's warning. Unease crept under my skin as I hurried to finish up so I could get out of there. On my way to the kitchen, the overhead lights flickered off suddenly, plunging the diner into inky darkness. I froze, listening. The humming refrigerators went silent. The electricity must have gone out. Then I heard it. That spine, chilling, gravelly voice in the shadows behind me. "Hello again. Miss me." I ran for the front door but found it locked from the outside. We never locked it while the restaurant was still occupied. Heart pounding, I changed course for the back exit. The man's heavy footsteps closed behind. I burst through the door into the alley just as his hands clutched at the fabric of my uniform. I sprinted the street, the sound of his laughter echoing behind me. My car was too far away. I'd never make it there before he caught me. Spotting a 24-hour laundromat across the road, I made a beeline for the glowing neon open sign, yanking the door open. The bored teenager manning the counter glanced up in surprise as I rushed in. "Help me," I gasped. "I'm being chased." Right on cue, the glass door shattered as the hooded man hurled himself against it. He snarled at the shop attendant before his eyes locked onto me, that chilling grin spreading wide. I screamed. The teenager, God bless him, grabbed a baseball bat from behind the counter and charged at the man, driving him back through the broken door. "Get out of here," he yelled over one shoulder. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran out into the street, trying to wave down a passing car. The driver, an elderly man, pulled over when he saw the look on my face. I jumped inside just as the hooded man regained the upper hand, knocking the teenager unconscious with a vicious blow to the head. "Drive!" I shrieked at the startled old man. He hit the gas, tires squealing as we left the scene behind. I gave him directions to the nearest police station, where I was finally able to report the terrifying encounters with the hooded stalker. The police took down all the details, but warned me that I didn't have enough evidence for them to press charges yet. They agreed to station a squad car outside my apartment building for the next few nights, which provided some small comfort, but I knew this wasn't over. It was 2 a.m. when I finally crawled into bed, emotionally drained with the lights left on. Sleep did not come easy. I tossed and turned, images of the hooded man chasing me through abandoned streets, flooding my exhausted mind. Sometime before dawn, I drifted off, only to be jolted awake an hour later by the sound of footsteps creaking up the stairs outside my apartment. I froze, pulse roaring in my ears. It was him. It had to be. He'd found me again. The footsteps paused outside my door. I stared wide-eyed into the darkness, afraid to breathe. Slowly, the doorknob began to rattle. He was trying to get in. I don't know why I decided to take that late-night walk through the park. Maybe it was to clear my head after a long day at work, or maybe I just wanted some fresh air before turning in for the night. Whatever the reason, it's a decision that still haunts me to this day. As I strolled down the lamplit path, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The park was empty at this hour, making me acutely aware of every little sound. The chirping crickets, the wind rustling through the trees, the distant hum of traffic. I picked up my pace, suddenly anxious to get home. That's when I first noticed him, a tall figure standing motionless under a tree up ahead. I froze, squinting into the shadows. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out his slender frame and pale skin that seemed to glow under the moonlight. Unease washed over me. No one in their right mind would be hanging out in a deserted park this late at night. I averted my eyes and walked faster, hoping to pass by without incident. I didn't get far before a bone-chilling voice rang out. "Leaving so soon," it rasped. Every hair on my body stood at attention. Slowly, I glanced back over my shoulder. The man was now standing in the middle of the path, head cocked to one side, studying me intently. My heart pounded against my ribs. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. I just needed to get as far away from this creep as possible. Without thinking, I broke into a sprint, my feet pounding against the pavement. I didn't get far before a hand shot out of the shadows and grabbed my wrist, wrenching me to an abrupt stop. I shrieked as my eyes landed on its owner, a disheveled older woman with wild gray hair. Her grip was unnaturally strong and ice cold. "Don't run, dearie," she rasped, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. "We just want to play." She gestured behind me. I whirled around to see 4 more people emerging from the trees, their eyes fixed hungrily on me. These couldn't be normal people. They moved in that strange, jerky manner that resembled a marionette on tangled strings. Their mouths were spread in inhuman grins that revealed mouths full of pointed teeth. I thrashed against the old woman's iron grip. This had to be a nightmare. I clamped my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up in the comfort of my bed. But the claws digging into my wrist felt terribly real. Laughter echoed around me, a guttural hyena-like cackling that turned my blood to ice. The creatures were toying with me, like a cat batting around a mouse before going in for the kill. I knew then that I wouldn't be making it home tonight. Mustering my courage, I drove my elbow back with all my might into the old woman's ribs. She let out a surprised yelp, her grip finally loosening. I didn't look back. I just ran blindly into the night as the creature's talons snatched at my heels. Their footsteps pounded behind me as I sprinted through the winding park trails. My lungs burned, but I didn't dare stop. I just had to make it back to the lights of the neighborhood. I'd be safe under the streetlights, I told myself. I was so focused on the street ahead that I didn't see the man from the path materialize in front of me. We collided head-on and I toppled to the ground with a shriek, skidding several feet across the concrete path. For a moment, all I could do was lay there gasping for air, my body throbbing. The man loomed over me, his frame blotting out the moonlight. "Thought you could get away, huh?" He snickered. He crouched down, his face just inches from mine. His breath reeked of rotting flesh. Behind him, I could see the others shuffling closer, their shark-like grins growing wider. This was it. I was going to die here, torn limb from limb by these. I thought of my family, my friends. I thought of my family, my friends, my coworkers, all the people who would soon be asking questions that no one could answer. As the man reached for me with his claw-like hands, rage suddenly boiled inside me. If this was how it ended, then I sure as hell wouldn't make it easy for them. With a primal scream, I drove my foot up with all my might, right between the man's legs. He shrieked and doubled over, not wasting a second. I scrambled to my feet and tore off just as the others were descending on me. I raced towards the park entrance, my arms pumping at my sides. Their enraged howls echoed behind me. I could hear their footsteps gaining ground. Just a little farther now. I was so close. I finally burst out of the park onto the empty suburban street. Floodlights from the surrounding houses illuminated the entire block. I glanced back to see the creatures skulking at the edge of the park entrance, their pale faces twisted in anger. But they made no move to follow me beyond the perimeter of the darkened park. Gasping for breath, I collapsed onto the curb, my whole body trembling. I sat hunched over with my head in my hands, unable to comprehend what I had just experienced. Had it been real? Or had my mind simply played tricks on me? As I sat there recovering, I became aware of shuffling footsteps approaching. A pair of scuffed work boots appeared at the edge of my vision. My head snapped up to see a middle-aged man in a utility uniform looking down at me with concern. "Miss, are you all right?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I wanted to tell him everything. The cold eyes watching me in the dark, the creatures emerging from the trees, the way they had chased me through the night. But it all seemed so absurd now under the golden glow of the streetlights. So instead, I simply nodded and choked out. "I'm okay, thank you." The man studied me for a moment before asking if he could call someone to give me a ride home. I assured him I'd be fine now. With a skeptical glance back at the dark park, he finally carried on his way, reminding me to get home safe. On shaky legs, I stood and hurried across the street to my apartment building. As soon as I was inside my lit apartment with the doors securely bolted, I collapsed onto my bed, exhausted. That night, I lay awake for hours, listening for any strange sounds at my door or window. I knew deep down those things were still out there lurking in the shadows, and the next time I crossed paths with them, I might not make it out alive. So now I stick to the daytime and avoid the park at all costs. But sometimes at night, I still hear that sinister laughter carried on the wind, and I wonder if they're hunting for me, their next victim. I've always considered myself a pretty friendly and outgoing guy. I like meeting new people, hearing their stories, and making connections. But after what happened last Tuesday night, I don't think I'll ever look at strangers the same way again. It started off as a normal evening. I had just gotten off work and decided to stop by the grocery store on the way home to pick up a few things. As I was browsing the aisles, I noticed an older man watching me from the end of the aisle. He was tall and slender, with stringy gray hair and a long tan coat. When I made eye contact with him, he quickly looked away. I brushed it off and continued my shopping, though I did feel a bit uneasy. After checking out, I loaded up my car and headed home. It was already dark by the time I pulled into my driveway. As I walked up to my front door, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around and there he was, the man from the grocery store standing at the end of my driveway, staring at me. I froze. How did he know where I lived? Why had he followed me home? "Can I help you?" I asked nervously. The man said nothing, just continued to stare with a strange smile on his face. After what felt like forever, he turned and walked away. I quickly rushed inside and locked the door. The next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the creepy grocery store stalker. I kept checking over my shoulder whenever I went out, but thankfully didn't see him again. I tried convincing myself that it was just some random weirdo and nothing to worry about. It wasn't until that next Tuesday that I saw him again. I was walking home from the bar after meeting some friends for a couple drinks. The whole way home, I had this strange feeling like I was being watched. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, getting faster and faster. I whirled around, and there he was, the man from the grocery store, running straight for me. I took off, sprinting down the street with him, chasing after me. My heart was pounding as I ran for my life, turning down random streets trying to lose him. Finally, I darted down an alleyway and jumped behind a dumpster to hide. I crouched there, shaking, listening for any sign of the man. After what felt like an eternity of silence, I finally worked up the courage to peer around the dumpster. The alley was empty. He was gone. I sagged against the dumpster, overwhelmed with relief. Once I got home, I double-checked all my locks and windows. I barely slept that night, terrified he would somehow find a way inside. The next week was uneventful. There was no sign of the mysterious stalker. I started to let my guard down a bit, hoping maybe he had given up. Or maybe it was all in my head. That next Tuesday evening, I was home watching TV when I heard a loud thump come from my backyard. I froze, listening closely. Suddenly, the motion sensor floodlights flipped on. I rushed to the window and pulled back the curtain. Standing there, staring up at me with that same twisted smile, was the man from the grocery store. I stifled a scream, my hands shaking and clammy. How did he find my house again? Why was he doing this? That's when I saw what he was holding. A long, shiny butcher knife that glinted under the floodlights. Before I could react, all the power in my house cut out, plunging me into darkness. I stood there trembling, blinded by the blackness. I heard the backyard gate creak open. He was in my yard. I fumbled toward the front door, arms outstretched, trying to feel my way. I heard the back door knob rattle, followed by a loud slam as he kicked it in. Heavy footsteps stomped down the hall, getting closer and closer and closer. Just as a dark silhouette appeared in the living room doorway, I made it to the front door, threw it open, and ran shrieking into the night. I sprinted down the empty road lined with darkened houses. Suddenly, I heard rapid footsteps behind me again. I pushed harder, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running and running, my feet pounding the pavement. My feet pounding the pavement, my breath coming out in panicked wheezes. Finally, I came upon a 24-hour gas station. I rushed inside and collapsed on the floor as the cashier called the police. That horrible night was over a year ago, but I still get panic attacks anytime I see someone that even vaguely resembles the grocery store stalker. I get jittery walking home at night and keep all my blinds closed. I know I'll never feel truly relaxed again after coming face to face with that creepy knife-wielding madman. He still haunts my thoughts, and I often wonder if he's out there hunting his next victim.